Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of From No Crypto to No Crypto. I'm your host, the Crypto Coach, Blockchain Wayne. Today's episode, as all others, are brought to us by FIO Protocol. Today we have Nirav from Camp Network. Nirav, man, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Wayne. Really great to be here. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, thank you, man. Pleasure to have you. Definitely want to jump into what you guys are doing right now with Camp Network, and kind of really also want to get your perspective on what you're building in the space, in that Web 2 to Web 3 intersection. But man, before we jump into that, can you share with us a little bit more about your background? Kind of what did you do prior to camp, and kind of what led you to this to this Web 3, or as you say, Web 2.5 space, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think we're trying to bridge over Web 2 to Web 3, so we sort of use that term Web 2.5, but we really appreciate the question. Background on me, I went to school out on the West Coast, from the West Coast Bay Area, native myself, go Niners, go Dubs. Spent for about 4.5 years in the investing and investment banking world, specifically for sports, entertainment, gaming, music, and all things media at large. I think one of the benefits to all of that is getting a firsthand look on how what I would call antiquated the industry really is. And what ended up leading me to sort of start Camp was we created an initial iteration of this called Campaign Layer, which was designed to be Patreon, if you're familiar with that business, sort of creator economy, but sort of designed to sort of play at the intersection of, creating super fans and identifying who they really are and capturing monetization around them. And ultimately, that was sort of the first iteration. And over time, we evolved, realized that we needed our own block space, sort of became an L2, and then saw the growth of AI. And that's really what led us to decentralize and become an L1. But I'm sure we'll discuss that further overall on this podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is interesting to think about that, and I definitely want to jump into what you guys are doing at camp. So, at its core, kind of tell us kind of what is camp now, like basically what
Yeah,
do you.
Camp is the autonomous IP layer one blockchain. The idea is users can register and tokenize their IP, whether that's data, songs, images, music, videos, or anything like that. And then using our sort of AI framework that we call Matrix, train and deploy agents around this user owned IP, and then allow other people to use these agents while handling the royalty distributions and payments to those whose IP is actually used to train these agents in the first place. We believe that the future of the world is agent to agent interactions. And in a world where that exists, fundamentally, you need user specific agents as well as task specific agents. And the only way to actually get that is via user owned IP in the first place. Everything that's publicly scrapable has already been done by the big companies, GPT, Gemini, as well as, call it Perplexity, Claude, Mistral as well. And so what that's done is create this really strong demand for user owned IP and user owned data. And we believe that Camp long term becomes the world's best user owned IP repository, which also doubles as the world's greatest sampling data marketplace as well.
Nice. So when you talk about merging Web 2 to Web 3, and we look at users, I always like to break things down for the user that they don't even understand what Web 3 is, right? And maybe they're just trying to learn what crypto and Web 3
Yeah.
are, and they're just trying to dabble in that space. So you gave some great examples, right? So you mentioned kind of like a musician, right? So I'm a musician today. I'm struggling to make things happen. I'm trying to get my brand out there. One of the things that I've toyed with talking to people in the past is how they could leverage NFTs to create kind of their own community and brand and distribution without selling everything to big brand, like selling
Yeah.
everything to a record label where they don't even own their own content. So how does that differ from what a musician can do leveraging Camp?
It's a great question, man. It's a couple of things here, and we'll give a couple of examples as well. But you look at the Web 2 systems in place for musicians, it's screwed. Like candidly, Spotify pays artists per stream 0.002 cents per stream. Most songs, the average, if you look at the top 200 songs on Spotify, historically have like an expected value of $50,000, and that's the 200 top songs. Like that's
Yeah.
not like some random Tom, Dick, and Harry song you hear at the pub on a Friday night. So musicians have historically been screwed pretty badly, and obviously, we saw a glimpse of what this could look like with new business models in 2022 when we looked at Blau and Royal and whatnot. The idea of tokenized royalties. We're trying to take this one step further. I'll give you a really simple example. We have a team building on Camp called Hitmaker, which is a decentralized streaming platform. Now over the past called 6 to 9 months, we've seen a lot of growth on the embedded wallets and sort of social account sign on. where UX Max is at the end of the day. You mentioned like, a lot of people don't really know what crypto is. We don't really know what Web3 is. That's how it should be. Nobody should have to know that this requires crypto. It should just be completely under the hood or under the rails at the end of the day. And so when we think about sort of a team like Hitmaker, it's a decentralized streaming platform. You're a musician, you put it up on there, you get comped at a different rate as opposed to Spotify just sucking the blood out of you completely, along with the way that sort of record labels, producers, there's 1,000 different parties involved in every song.
Right.
Now, where we think this gets really interesting is you look at the world, in about 10 years, 95% of all new content generated will be done via AI. And what that's created is the necessity of provenance, which is proving that you're the first one to do something. And so with a song like yours, let's say it's a banger, but now one of the big DJs in the world, or even me, prosumer is the new term, professional consumers, but like, I remixed your song and put it up on the same platform, whether it's Hitmaker. Let's say everybody pays me instead because I'm sort of the remixer. What Camp enables is you to be paid for the original royalties as well that you deserve. So let's say you enable it such that I can remix it, such that I have to pay you 10% of all the proceeds that I make. That's something that we enable and handle at the execution layer, such that we make sure that everybody is compensated accordingly. And we've completely purpose built our layer one blockchain for all things related to that, including gasless transactions when it comes to royalties as well.
Yeah, man, that's very interesting. I love. I mean, let's unpack some of the things you said because
Yeah,
it is so important. And I tell this to people all the time that when people use the technology, we got to get to the point where they don't even realize they're using it. Right? When we
100%.
use the internet today, we don't you don't have to know what an IP address is, what HTTPS, what DNS, and all of that is. Right? You can just utilize it. We have to stop basically highlighting the technology and focusing on the benefits to the user. And that example you gave about Spotify, man, is funny. I use that one all the time, a similar one, just because I speak annually at this music conference in New Orleans called NOLA Musicon. And that's one of the things I always bring up because it attracts a ton of musicians. And when you look at that space, just the gated industry, one, it's heavily gated. And then you've got to sell pretty much everything, all your IP to the label, producer, right? All those people take a cut, and then now the best way for that consumers connect to musicians is on a streaming platform. They don't walk into a store and buy a CD anymore, right? So it's that distribution model is not really paying out. They're getting paid almost nothing, even for having millions of streams.
Yeah.
So
We're actually seeing this on the video side as well. You look at like the 2000 teens, it was defined by Netflix was sort of the first one, and I'm sure some of the boomers and the millennials will remember, but maybe the Zoomers won't. But there was this huge trend of OTT, which is over the top, which you basically got rid of the middleman, which was sort of like the cable provider, like the Comcast or the Spectrums of the world, and then you had basically the streaming platforms directly sort of going to the content IP rights holders and basically going over the top, skipping that step, and so it's a smaller number of subs, but they're paying more, and so the cash flows are effectively the same. But the result of all of that was people were like, "Holy cow! Netflix has 150 million subs. What the hell are we doing?" And so Apple launched Apple TV, Disney launched Disney Plus, Google had YouTube TV, and the result of it was pretty much there was this giant streaming wars, is what it was called. And the biggest beneficiaries of all of it was the IP holders underneath. Anybody who was creating original content, they were the ones who could basically put all these big-bodied tech companies in a bidding war against each other. And so now we're seeing that happen in the same time right now with, number one, streaming. We have a team called Rewarded TV, which they're using tokens as capital formation, and then users basically get to buy in for the film as opposed to the company having to take like $1 million line of credit at 10% or predatory interest rates at this point. And then the minute that they get that line of credit, they're selling it to Amazon, and everybody gets paid. It's yield effectively. You're tokenizing content as opposed to tokenizing RWAs, which is something we've seen. And similar to that point where I mentioned where independent IP became more valuable in the world, where tech companies started to bid up on streaming wars, we're seeing the same thing happen in AI right now. Where because everything that's already publicly scraped, GPT paid Reddit $100 million. That was like effectively like, hey, we've been using your data, don't sue us. Like here's $100 million type situation. We're already starting to see those new model and new agent companies in particular. They're trying to train on very interesting IP that's never been done before. And similar to what happened, the demand and the value accrual goes to the people who actually own the underlying data themselves, which in the case is for us, the users, right? We're the ones who give Reddit or Twitter value because we're the ones who are creating content on that platform. And that's why we believe that we should be compensated accordingly in the world where all AI dominates everything.
gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, in essence, what you're saying is a lot of these big companies are already monetizing all this information. They've been doing it for years. Camp, if I'm correct, Camp gives you a chance to basically give the creator, give each individual that ability to take back some of that ownership, monetize it themselves, and create kind of this separate ecosystem from where it's just big companies, you know, benefiting from scraping all that data. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. And I want to make sure I answer the question correctly. But
Yeah.
CAM's beneficiary is twofold. We believe the form factor by which users come on chain in the future should be the application layer, not the blockchain layer. Like,
Yes.
how many times do you see people take a photo and fucking upload it to like AWS? No, they
Yeah.
upload it to Instagram, which then gets stored to AWS. So it's all through the
Yeah.
application layer. And so we're purpose built for the application layer, and we believe that as apps get better and better on blockchain, people will create new data on blockchain, and then you don't get as much more dependent on like Google or Spotify or Netflix. The benefit of blockchain is self sovereignty of all IP as well as the payment rails, and that's something we view as really valuable. The second is we're bringing this off-chain data from sources like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, the usual Spotify, on-chain in the most verified way possible. It's through a combination of zkTLS, APIs, access, Chrome extensions, and whatnot. And from there, you're 100% right. Basically, people will license data directly from these users, and they get comped as opposed to Reddit and these centralized tech companies keeping everything at the end of the day. But the key is it's all about user-owned IP.
Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. So when you look at this, what are some? I mean, you gave one example that was really great, right? The streaming platform that's building. They're building on camp, right? Or they utilizing your tech.
Yeah, they're all utilizing their own blockchain. Maybe we could walk through a couple other examples if that seems interesting to you. Why this is interesting is, sorry, Wayne, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, no. It's perfect. Yeah, yeah. That's exactly where I was going. Was basically, where people can really tie this in. Like we think of stuff from an abstract level, and you gave some great examples to kind of make it real for people to where they can understand use case. But that's where I always love to dive a little bit deeper. And what else are you seeing in terms of early building interest or sectors that are really gravitating towards you?
Yeah, I mean, look, we are very transparent about this. We're UX maxis. We want apps that people actually use, not just are using to farm or trade effectively. And so I would say 80% of the 60 native teams are up to, that's native. That's not like they're deployed everywhere. If we include that stat, it's like 300 plus. But like of the native teams, I would say 60 to 85%, 75, let's call it, are in the entertainment, social, music, and culture spaces. And we get excited by that because it means that they're apps that people actually want to use. I'll give you a really simple example. We have a team called Novel, Knovel. The idea is it's similar to like a Wattpad or a like Substack where users can upload their own scripts, basically their own like writing and whatnot, whether it's scripted, non-scripted, fiction, nonfiction, and whatnot. And what we're seeing is nowadays a lot of folks are trying to emulate the style of J.K. Rowling. AI has made it such that anybody can sort of write with different styles because the models are trained that way. So one of the things that's really cool is we have another team called Storychain, which does exactly this. And so, an artist could publish something to Merv and then sort of say like, this is my initial draft of it. Like people build on top of it and use tokens as the incentivization mechanism for people to do things on top of them. And then we're seeing some of these folks basically like use Storychain to say like, oh, I really like this, but could we make this a little bit more spookier in the style of an Agatha Christie, like murder style mystery or something like that. And then once they remix it, now you have the new novel on chain that maybe more people are reading. But the key is that the original holder of that IP is getting compensated for that accordingly with royalties as well. We're seeing a lot of examples with AI, AI generated IP. We have a team called Rebel, which makes it such that you can create art in any way, shape, or form. We have a new team called Archivist, which makes it such that you can create new like questing similar to a Pokemon Go, but for brands or creators. And the rewards can be anything from new art that the creators actually launch themselves using our platforms, like a team like Rebel AI, as I mentioned. So we're seeing a lot, what I would say, on the IP generation via both AI and via consumers, IP remixing via like models, whether it's voice, video, music. And I would say the third is launch pads. And so over the next couple of weeks, one of the things that we're really excited about is we're working with the creator Rob, who actually like draws, and we're having a team of ours called Merv basically create an entire anime comic around this exact character, combined with a bunch of our teams to prove this is where the future of IP is trending towards. A creator proves that they own something, and we're AI creating content around it as well, getting feedback loops, and then even doing the next iterations of it that are going to be more successful, we believe.
Awesome, awesome, man. Everything you say, I kind of get goosebumps hearing it because I talk to so many people in the industry that are building. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're building great tech, right? Blockchains, some level of DApp, but it's still very much is clunky and disconnected from the rest of the world. When you can seamlessly create something, what did you call yourself? A UX maxi?
We're UX and DevX maxis for the
Yeah,
development, not just
yeah.
UX as well. Yeah.
And I love that because the user experience is really all that matters. I don't care how good somebody's tech is if nobody's going to use it. you can't get the, and I'm not talking about existing crypto and Web3 people, right? Of course, we're going to use it because we want to try out new stuff. But to get the masses in, it's got to be that seamless thing to where they don't even realize they've crossed that bridge. Like they don't
Yeah.
even realize they're there. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think a couple of things that you really mentioned is, look, when you look at the entire, like, for scale reference, the markets are up a little bit, whatever. Like, it's been in the shitter for a while, but
Yeah,
like, the
absolutely.
entire crypto market cap is roughly $2.67 trillion. After the bump on Wednesday, or what a day is it, Wednesday or whatever it was, Nvidia alone is worth $2.8 trillion. So like
Yeah.
us pretending that we live in like this world where we're catering to a bunch of users is ridiculous because Nvidia is worth more than our entire industry combined. That's the first thing to keep in mind. The second
Absolutely.
is like people love to shill like Coinbase has 100 million wallets. That's like a BS number. That's just people who have ever bought ETH in their life. And like, my generation, that was like buy fake IDs at the end of the day, effectively,
Yeah.
something like that. What really ends up happening a lot of the times is what you mentioned is the tech is getting better and better. Like you're seeing higher TPS, you're seeing better gas blocks, you're seeing better UX, like better maxis. What am I saying? Better like account abstraction come into play as well. But fundamentally, most of this is being built for the same 100,000 to 250,000 DeFi users. We're basically trading on every new chain, whether it's a new purpose protocol or it's new lending, solely for the purpose of yield, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I want to make that extremely clear. But if we think like as an industry, we're trying to get bigger and actually like have things live on chain for the fundamental ethos of decentralization, it's not going to happen via DeFi, unfortunately. Like
Right.
that's just the way it is. And so what we get really excited about it, all that I was alluding to is applications that have mass appeal. Nobody goes on Spotify because it's built on AWS or GCP or Azure. I don't know the business well enough to do so. People go on Spotify because for $9.99 you can play pretty much every song in the world ad free on demand. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Nothing like that exists on crypto today, and we're hoping that using Camp we're unlocking these new primitives that enable that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where more people need to focus, right? Not just all this on chain stuff. I mentioned the Ethereum addresses. I think probably 20 to 30 of those are mine, right? So
Yeah.
you're right. We have, different wallets, different burner wallets, different things that I use for farming and yield or airdrops that I don't want to connect to my main wallet because
Yeah.
some of it could
I,
be risky.
I mean, you look at like testnet metrics where it's like we have 11 million wallets. Dude, if you can find me a single thing with real 11 million wallets, I'll give you like $10,000 because you think about how difficult it is to get something like 11 million monthly active users in Web 2 and it's crazy. The companies that like that are like it's something like a DraftKings, and I don't even know if they're at 10 million at this point, but that's a pretty
Yeah.
universally well-known brand. So my point is in crypto, let's stop the whole like let's get the next 100 million users onto blockchain. Let's start with 100,000 KYC users on chain as a start and then move it up to a million. Let's not like try and shoot for the moon from day one. Things have to happen slowly and steadily, which is exactly how the internet happened as well. And even more parabolic, I'd say, is probably like the 2000 teens of gaming. Nobody really thought mobile games would ever be a thing. If you remember in the 2000s, everybody was playing like COD, Halo, exclusively on 360, PS3, effectively. And then some guy was like, "Hey, your phone's pretty powerful. You can do some shit on it." And then you had Clash of the Clans, Zynga that attached themselves to Facebook. And then you're like, "Oh my God, why does anybody game on computers anymore? Like, we could play this on the subway. We could play this on a plane. Like, it makes so much sense." And so, the key is they took it one step at a time. And I'm hoping that's what we're going to see on blockchain development as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely something that's needed when everybody speaks mass adoption, but it sounds like you've got a really good take on it. Definitely, one of the best ones I've heard because we've got to we've got to kind of shift that thinking and do it across, uh, really across what everybody's doing. And I've always said like usability, user experiences is the key. When you talk about that massive curve of adoption with the internet, as you mentioned earlier, right? I mean, that didn't happen until the UI UX got better, right? If we were still on green screen DOS, like we wouldn't be where we are today. But application layers were built on top of that, Windows and others, to where now it's pretty much where that really spawned the adoption. As it got easier for people to use, more people used it. One of the I can't give credit to this to myself, but one of the statements I hear all the time, that people are repeating is the one that I heard from Andreas Antonopoulos about 10 or 11 years ago, where he was talking about, think about the phone, right? The phone, or email, not the phone, email, right? Email in the early days was very complex. It was hard for people. Like you had to understand a little bit about code in it, and it was very complicated just to send an email. And that was in the 90s, right? And when you look at today, an elderly mother or grandfather that doesn't have any tech experience can send an email with the swipe of a finger on an iPhone or iPad. And well, yes, the technology improved some. It was all about the UI. It got so easy that you could just do it. And that's where we've got to get with this, man. Because I try out a lot of these new programs where it's coming out. Like you talk about a lot of testnet programs and staking yield, playing games, and some of them it's just complex, and everybody has to start looking at it from the lens of, okay, don't look at it from the lens of, okay, I'm already involved in crypto Web3, so I do understand how to navigate this. Give it to somebody that has zero experience, and but they're familiar with like your Spotify's, like your game, mobile gaming and these other things that they can get in and they can use this simply. Then we've made some progress.
Yeah, I mean, look, I couldn't agree with you more. And it doesn't happen overnight. That's the mistake a lot of people in crypto think happens. Like, I'll give you a simple example. I went to school in the West Coast at Berkeley for college. And like one of the beautiful things about growing up in the Bay Area, not to sound like super pretentious, is like you're kind of the tech alpha market of everything. Like Uber's, one of their alpha markets was my high school. Like people in high school used to take Ubers, and it was like $6 to go 10 miles. It was a crazy concept. And like even still, when you could initially start using your tap to pay for everything on a phone, like I was like, this is mind blowing. But it took 4 years for them to retroactively fit that into all, the credit card machines and readers and whatnot. This entire industry, when you think about like actual development, is less than 3 years old. It's been relevant for a long time in terms of trading, price, like tokens and whatnot. But the way that builders have started to come into it and start build actual applications at scale, it's only a post FTX thing, which was like Q4 2022. So, it's going to take time is the biggest thing. And you mentioned it, like, again, there's a certain component of cost of education, but if the UX gets good enough, which to a point it should, like Venmo is the best example of this, like then everybody will use it, and I hope by the time by 2030 that we'll start to see some applications actually work. One of the bigger things that gives people really bad taste in their mouth when it comes to blockchain is you say like this application's awesome, you log in, a wallet's created, step one done. Number two is trying to get funds on chain. On ramps are not great still. Like, let's be honest, and the fees are pretty criminal. So it's that's already a churn point number two. Churn point number three is like if it's a game, half the time it's Ponzi-nomics. The minute the incentives run out, nobody wants to play it because the gameplay's not very good.
Right.
That's a churn point number three. Churn point number four could be like if it's an application, you're like, okay, I did something. It took fucking forever to actually happen, or like nothing really happened. Point of churn number five. So like, look, we're gonna start addressing these things over time. 2 years ago, creating a wallet with the Google account was brutal. Now it's like everybody and their mom. That's the base minimum at the end of the day. So it's gonna happen in time, is my guess.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So as we start to wrap up, man, there's been some great points and so much talked about, but I would like to focus a quick bit on the, I guess the specifics of the chain, right? Kind of, and camp, right? Is it, you said it's a layer two chain. You mentioned that earlier.
Layer one blockchain.
Well, layer one. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Layer one blockchain. What are some like the consensus methods? Some of the, like, is there any kind of staking? Is there any kind of running nodes available for participants?
Yeah, we'll have a set of validators, and over time we'll decentralize the network. Obviously security is pretty paramount for us, especially when you're dealing with user-owned IP. Somebody's song gets leaked or a tweet gets leaked, not a big deal. Longer term, we think this has potential for user-owned IP to be everything from like, banking statements is the ultimate dream, but like health records is something in the more reasonable near-term future. And when those things get leaked, it's a much bigger deal. So security is definitely very paramount for us. Our thesis is built for the application layer fundamentally. So one of the things we've done, we're sort of a substrate fork, if you will. But like every app that's building on top of Camp with our good friends over at Gelato, we have a deal with them where any app that's building on top of Camp, they can launch what we call a side camp, which is effectively an app chain that inherits our security as well. But the key there is they get their own execution environment. So fundamentally, it's lower latency. In terms of everything else, we've prioritized the execution layer to sort of be specifically for AI and IP related transactions. Historically, when you look at what transactions are usually prioritized by a set of validators, it's almost always DeFi because that is the highest MEV by a mile. So if you're like a consumer developer, it sucks. Like that's why you have low latency in the first place. So that's one of the things we built into the execution layer, along with making it such that anytime you register IP or handle royalty distribution, that's completely gasless as well. So we're completely UX maxi to say the very least. We're up there on terms of scalability with everybody else. At some point, you stop caring about what the TPS is and you care more that the chain actually works over time, which is how we think about the layer one.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff, man. So also, can you tell everyone where they can find out more information about Follow You, Follow Camp Network, and also how to join your communities?
Yes, we'd love that. Camp Network XYZ on Twitter. Camp Network XYZ Camp Network XYZ. Jesus. Camp Network on Twitter. Nirav.Murthy on Twitter. Nworth on Telegram as well. I'll put all that in the comments over here. Yeah. Join the community. Testnet comes out the week of 4/21, I believe, is that Monday. And then Incentivize Eco Hub goes live 4/28. We're going to be launching with 20 plus dApps. It's a super exciting time. Come join the Camp Revolution.
Awesome. So everyone, make sure to jump in, follow what Camp's doing, man. I see big things from this. We didn't even talk about, and you don't even have to I love you're resting on what you guys are doing, but man, you have some great partnerships and backers in this industry. When I looked at the names and everything that was on your site, so I foresee a lot of success for what you're doing. I'll be a cheerleader as well because I'm a big fan of focusing on user experience, usability, and onboarding. When we talk about onboarding the masses, it's not just a cliche term. It actually is taking that action that is going to actually bring more people in, which is focusing on seamless, all right, reduce friction, right? That's one thing I say a lot, frictionless
Yeah.
experience, and that's what people need to have. So, Nirav, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, super fun podcast, Wayne. Really excited. Please, like, my DMs are always open if you're interested in building, if you're interested in being a Discord ambassador, like, please, always happy to chat as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, make sure to follow Nirav. So, thanks everyone for listening. Nirav, thanks for coming on today, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.